Every day we read the news and we feel a sense of disempowerment. The powerful oppress the weak. Our cities are polluted, and we can't seem to put a stop to sexual violence and harassment. We face a myriad of diverse challenges in society today, and yet they can all be linked to the same cause: human behavior and its relationship to change. Change is one of the most paradoxical aspects of the human condition. On the one hand, change is core to being human. It's been an enduring theme of our arts, philosophy, sciences for centuries. Every single day, for better or for worse, we unwittingly shape the world with our actions and our choices. And an equal and opposite reaction, the world changes us. Even our brains have the capacity to remold. Neuroscience tells us that we can actually change the connections between our neurons and even overcome our own genetic code. And yet, intentional change is difficult. Think about your own lives for a second. How many of us have tried to be more productive, to exercise more regularly, to develop better eating habits? Change is difficult. It requires effort. It requires the shifting and the disruption of deeply ingrained habits and patterns. Now that we know this, let's put this in perspective. If we find change in our own lives so challenging, how are we supposed to change the behaviors of millions of people? Time and time again, we see the same failures in development. We set ambitious goals. These goals often involve introducing new behaviors, such as sending girls to school, or stopping old behaviors, such as open defecation and littering. We spend vast resources in developing tools and products and technologies and social services. We create infrastructure, we create access, we design programs to raise awareness. And yet, at the end of the day, people don't behave the way we expect them to. Despite all our good intentions, we are left with little impact. And that is why I'm here to talk to you today about how we can adopt a new lens to view and solve the social systemics problems of our society. A people-first tool that accounts for our flaws, our complexities, and our resistance to change. And I believe that that tool is behavioral science. Now, many of you will already have heard of behavioral science, right? Nudges and behavioral design have been a hot topic in news. And many of you will think of behavioral science as vague, as theoretical, as typical first-world solutions that have no applicability in a complex, ambiguous, ever-changing context like India. The question then becomes, how do we integrate behavioral insights to improve a country like India? That is actually the question that brought me to India. And today I'm going to share a practical framework that I hope can help you think about the very same question. My framework has 3 pillars: understand, design, and improve. The first step is to understand behavior. Albert Einstein once said, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. When we are designing for behavior change, we need to spend every single one of those 55 minutes thinking about why people behave the way they do. Typically, we don't give much time to behavior. We view behavior through what economists call a neoclassical lens, the idea that we are these consistently rational individuals who go through our day-to-day lives, changing our behavior to better ourselves and society. Psychology tells us this could not be further from reality. We are flawed, we are complex, and we are deeply irrational. For example, did you know that the majority of our decision-making is actually driven by an automatic system in the brain? This automatic system is super fast, it's efficient, it helps us make quick decisions, but it's also responsible for psychological and neurological biases. And these biases dictate our behavior. It's why we selectively process information, jump to conclusions, make snap judgments, generalize, stereotype. They're dangerous. And this is why we need to have a deeper and more complex understanding of behavior. Biases are dangerous. We need to understand behavior in a local context. Look at our motivation, right? We think we are deeply rational, but we are actually motivated by social and emotional factors. We are more motivated by the social norms and the networks of our communities than by traditional economic incentives and rewards. Take sanitation, right? Sanitation is a hugely important development goal. And when changing open defecation practices, it's actually a behavioral challenge more than anything. In addition to the biases and the social stigma and the strong belief systems that surround using latrines, when you probe deeper, you find that many women actually look forward to the walk before dawn and after dusk. It is the only time of day where they get a respite from their household responsibilities and where they can enjoy the social company of other women. Understanding behavior and our underlying motivations in a local context is absolutely key. Let's move to the second step of this framework. We've got an understanding now. Now we need to design. How do we design for behavior change? Typically, if we encounter gender or racial discrimination in our workplace, what do? We assemble a dedicated task force. We put together anti-discrimination training. We talk about biases and stereotypes and prejudice. Unfortunately, awareness very rarely translates into action. Our mental models, our biases, our belief systems are, to put it very simply, sticky. They're resistant to change. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because the situation becomes even more complex in a developing context. Not only are our behaviors naturally resistant to change, but poverty can actually deplete our capacity for change. Living in a distressing and a difficult circumstance, the brain is under unceasing onslaught. And research actually shows that the reality of poverty can reduce our cognitive bandwidth and our ability to attend to information. So what this means is when we are designing for behavior change, we cannot have a design that has even the slightest bit of additional effort for individuals. It simply won't work. I'll give you a brief example. A team of researchers in Kenya found that people weren't using chlorine to sterilize the water at home, despite the threat of waterborne diseases. Despite the fact that chlorine was widely and cheaply available in local shops, people weren't using it because it was an additional effort to remember to buy it and to use it. So the team of researchers decided to trial a number of different behavioral interventions to see what would change behavior, what would increase the uptake. One group received coupons to see if cost was a barrier, because the coupons could be exchanged for free chlorine. Another group had chlorine delivered to their homes to see if inconvenience of going to the shop was a factor. Nothing changed. In the third group, a chlorine dispenser was installed next to the water source, which would produce the exact amount of chlorine needed to fill a standard bottle. Uptake increased from 10 to 60%. People were gathered near the water source already. It was minimal effort to fill up the chlorine. And something else happened. Role modeling. The social forces of seeing other people do the same thing had a knock-on effect on behavior. Now, the reason I give you this example is because, as strange as it may sound, when we are designing for behavior change, we have to stop trying to change how people behave. It doesn't work. Instead, armed with an understanding of how people actually behave, as we did in the previous step, we need to change the circumstances that shape their behavior. And this is actually one of the secrets of behavioral science. Behavioral science is about removing barriers, not creating new ones. It is about the path of least resistance and the law of least effort. And in reality, this can be very simple. It can be about changing the wording on a page or the way a choice is presented, or it can be recycling bins, colorful recycling bins that prompt you to recycle your water bottles. Now that we have a design, the final step of this framework is improve. We all know the importance of measurement when it comes to impact. But when I'm talking about behavior, it's about improvement. Measurement alone is not enough. And when I talk about improvement, like the other speakers before me, I'm talking about the power of data. Every waking moment of our lives, we create information and data. Big data is just another way of describing the behavioral data that we create. We live in an absolutely revolutionary time for behavioral science. We have the potential to combine behavioral insights with cutting-edge technologies, with AI, machine learning, computational neuroscience. And we can actually improve our solutions using this data. We no longer have to guess or make assumptions. We can use these technologies to intelligently gather large sets of data in real time. We can measure the success of our solutions, and we can use that feedback to iterate and refine our solutions until we are sure that we have created lasting, sustainable behavior change. Now, we are very clearly in embryonic stages, and we've got a way to go before we can scale this kind of approach to the context that you and I work in. But I've given you a very brief overview through Understand, Design, and Improve of how you might develop a plan to apply behavioral science. And as I look at all of you sitting here, I'm truly excited about the future. A future where we can combine cutting-edge tools and technologies, where we can put behavioral science as a cornerstone of our solutions and our interventions, and where we, as change makers, can pave the way and change those news headlines for a better world. Thank you for listening.